Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Sarah Mia. Every September, mental health professionals mark Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. This year, the month took on new meaning because of the pandemic. COVID-19 has forced many people into isolation. More and more people participating in quarantine are reporting feelings of depression. According to a poll released by the Kaiser Family Foundation, 47% of people stuck at home reported intense levels of stress and anxiety. The KFF poll reported that the effects of isolation were found to be more extreme in older adults and teenagers. Both are already more likely to report depression or suicidal tendencies. The poll also revealed 54% of those losing income or jobs suffered more mental stress. According to the LA Times, the loosening of public health restrictions in LA County has helped ease the mental health crisis. In early April, 47% of surveyed county residents reported mild to severe symptoms of emotional strain. Since then, as the reopening has accelerated, that rate has decreased to 36%. As you can tell, we're going to spend some time today talking about mental health struggles. We realize this content can sometimes be difficult and triggering for some to hear. If you need support, there are 24/7 resources ready to take your call. You can find those numbers on the screen. On Point's Sammy Fernandes has more on the story.
Thank you, Saren. We are here today with Angel Corros, a peer educator at the Plus Project at California State University, Northridge, Dr. Mark Stevens, a professor in the Educational Psychology and Counseling at CSUN, Cheryl, Eskin, and Tracie Andrews, both co-chairs at the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Network. Let's start with Angel, who will add a personal perspective on how her mental health has been affected by COVID-19. Since the transition to online learning in March, when was the tipping point that made you realize COVID-19 was affecting your mental health?
I think when I realized maybe a month in the pandemic and the transition to learning, it was much harder for me to concentrate in my classes. I felt less motivation. It was really hard on also the teachers, I feel, while they were trying to communicate with us what to do and how we were changing. I realized it was much harder for me. The difference between sitting in a classroom versus sitting at home, the setting was really drastic. So I felt my mental health was declining a lot at the time because I was stuck in the same spot for like hours doing my homework and then also doing my Zoom classes. So it was like a lot of the same routine. I didn't have that commuting to school, being able to walk to my classes, being able to like talk with my friends in between my breaks. It was just structured to like being kept at home.
And certainly you're not the only student coping with mental health as they navigate these uncertain times in isolation. Dr. Stevens, as a professor, have you noticed a difference amongst your students in how they interact with online learning versus on-campus learning?
I would concur with what Angel has said, that there's a way that these personal interactions that they have, whether it's walking from class to class or saying, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee, that we sort of take for granted. And when it's pulled away, there's a sense of loss that happens. So the social interactions that go on in person is a really valued part of who we are as human beings. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect is just what it's like to be in a Zoom room and to be motivated to learn, and looking at a camera, having to look at yourself and not being distracted. And it is, as Angel said, and I appreciate your empathy, Angel. It's not easy for professors too, because we're having to pull into these different bags of tricks of how are we going to keep our students entertained, and they're really, really tired. And they talk about Zoom fatigue, and I really think it is a true physiological and psychological phenomena that we all experience.
And how do you think students can maintain their mental health in times when they have no idea what the future holds for them in the midst of a pandemic?
Well, people are doing it in a variety of different ways. So there's not one way how to be resilient during these times, but I think it's about going into your resiliency box and going, what have I experienced before in my life that I could use right now? Perhaps what are some different tools that I can use? And I think normalizing that there's a sense of helplessness that's going on, but not keeping it internal and not knowing you're the only one that's feeling it. So being able to reach out, talk with your fellow classmates, talking with other peers to say, how are you navigating these really difficult times? And I think that we really want to pay attention to the body, mind, and spirit during these times. So what kind of exercise are you getting? What are some of your ways of making meaning and sense out of this, which is the kind of the spirit part? What can you rely on to remind yourself of the gratitude that you may have? And then with our mind, it's looking at what are our expectations? How are we going to adjust to this new world and put some perspective on it? So it's about managing our expectations. Part of what's really difficult is we don't know when this is going to be over. We don't know when it's going to change. And I think that's part of how do you keep hope alive when you don't know where this is really going to go. So places where you can, inside yourself or your interactions with others, how can you keep hope alive seems to be really important for our mental health during this time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And following along your answer, I would like to ask Eskin and Andrews. We know that social isolation is only one of the multiple problems we are having right now in 2020, ranging from financial instability to racial inequality. How can a person keep their hope up when most news is devastating right now in the world?
That's a tricky one. I mean, I'm tying into what everyone has said so far, and I think really hard to keep hope alive. It seems like every day things get a little darker on a lot of fronts. I think we're realizing more than ever how important connection is in our lives, not just social connection, but physical connection and touch and all those sorts of things that we all are missing. So I think on an individual level, I mean, obviously safely connecting with people, but on an individual level, really trying to figure out coping skills or things that work for you that might help give you a little glimmer of hope or some inspiration or something to get out of bed in the morning, whether it's, you know, talking with a friend or seeing someone socially distance or exercise or journal, whatever it is. I think volunteering or getting involved in your community, finding some way to create, even if it's a small, like change starts with one person. So even if your, you know, actions impact only one person, that's still doing something. So maybe redefining it, not, you know, obviously I love to think big, but I think, you know, what can you do? Do you have a neighbor who can't get groceries and you can help with things like that? There's simple things you can do that maybe give some hope that there still is good in this world and that we will get through this. Because I think how we are going to get through this is coming together.
For me, especially since I use social media a lot. There's a lot of news that comes in from like on my feed and like on my explore page, especially on Instagram. So what I do, I usually try to take breaks, not spend as much time on social media, really try to take care of myself, do meditation, because actively engaging in all of that can be very distressing and it does impact your mental health. So really being able to take breaks from just looking at all of that is also an important aspect.
100%. I would agree, and recognizing in yourself when it's too much too, because constantly seeing these images on overload, how that can be disastrous to your mental health. And social media can be amazing for connection and finding help and support, but it can also be really damaging with the images and the things that you see. So having that awareness, definitely.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons with social media. And Angel, you are a peer educator in the Boost Project, a program that promotes awareness and education about depression and suicide prevention. How did your involvement with the program start?
I've always been interested in the Blues Project ever since they did a presentation in my class. I think it was in a psychology class that they did. So in the Blues Project, we do presentations around campus and in classrooms to raise awareness for depression and suicide prevention. And it really spoke to me, especially being a college student, a first year college student who really didn't know anything about, you know, college and what it was like. And going from high school, I already had my own mental health problems. So it was really reassuring for me to find people and peers who really were supportive in that sense and who really wanted to help and who were speaking out about it. So last semester, I really um, made it a point to actually want to join, and I filled out an application. It was fairly simple, and yeah, now I'm part of the Blues Project, so I'm very happy about it.
And I would like to ask Angels, at the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Network, have you noticed any spikes in suicide rates and or behavior since the pandemic started, or have you noticed any change at all?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So as far as suicide spikes, it's way too early to tell. We have to wait for data to tell us that. What we can tell you is that there's definitely been an increase in people experiencing depression and anxiety, isolation, connection, feeling stir crazy, right? Almost that like Groundhog Day feeling of like one day to the next, it's just absolutely the same. Definitely have seen an increase in that. On the flip side, though, we've also seen an increase in people reaching out for help, wanting to get more services, wanting to have more conversations about why are they feeling the way that they're feeling, how can they get some support with the way that they're feeling, where are places they can connect with other people in a safe way. To help them with some of their feelings. And so we are definitely seeing both sides of that. I think Cheryl can also speak to specifically on Teen Line some of the increases that they're seeing anecdotally. But from a bigger picture, data takes a while to get there. But we definitely have seen a shift in how people are coping and dealing.
If you want me to, in my other hat, I'm the program director at Teen Line, which is a teen-to-teen hotline for teens, usually middle and high school students, to reach out about anything they're struggling with. And what we've definitely seen, definitely shifts in things since the pandemic began. We're working remotely, like most other people. And so that's been interesting. It's been hugely empowering for our teens who staff the hotline that they've been able to continue helping other people, because I think that's meaningful. Like Angel was talking about, being able to help your peers is so meaningful. But it's also challenging because they're struggling with a lot of the same issues that our callers are calling about, which is unique. We're all in this together. But to Tracie's point, what we've really seen increases in loneliness, anxiety, problems with family relationships, child abuse, heartbreakingly, a lot of reporting of child abuse or really unsafe family environments, which is really hard to hear. Body image has started to creep up as well. I think there's a lot of jokes about the quarantine 15 or, things of that. A lot of people baking, home more. So we've definitely been seeing that. And then just associated depression and suicidal thoughts. And kind of existential questioning sometimes of, when things particularly are so difficult, what's the point of everything, and how do I keep going on? It's really hard, especially when, Angel said it so eloquently about missing, the interactions of walking to class or, seeing peers in real life of what's that like. It's like school without the fun parts of school is how I've heard it described. So, not that learning isn't fun, but even the professor here is laughing of like how much the social interaction we do miss.
Yeah, we are all suffering in different ways. COVID-19 got us all by surprise. But Dr. Stevens, you have extensive experience in counseling and psychotherapy with men, and there is a stigma of men having to hide their feelings, otherwise they are seen as fragile or weak. What can society do to change that stigma?
I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to come about it just a little bit because I'm going to also talk about the COVID around the environment of COVID-19. And there's a couple interesting statistics that are coming out about this, that men are more likely to not wear a mask during COVID-19 because they don't want to be seen as vulnerable. And so part of male socialization is don't look vulnerable. And to wear a mask means, oh, I'm vulnerable. I can get something like this, or I look weak or something like that. So that's one issue. The other issue that I'm hearing with men is that men's sense of identity and self-esteem is often related to productivity. And so during this time, the measuring of productivity has to really change. And so men are trying to figure out, how do I feel productive during this time? If their work has changed or they're out of work, that's another issue. And then I think what goes along with not feeling very productive is a sense of who am I? And that can lead to some added depression. Now, the guys aren't going to say I'm feeling depressed, but they can feel like something is really sort of missing in their life.
Angel, I would like to ask you, I know you've suffered with depression since 11th grade, since high school. What are some ways that you have been coping with the pandemic, and how did you learn about them despite the Blues Project?
Well, some ways I've been coping is mainly with connection. So I make sure to like talk with my friends, spend time with my family. It was really hard a few months ago because I was diagnosed with COVID. So I didn't have any social interactions. I couldn't be with my family. So even in that time, I had to figure out what are some ways I can cope. And it was just through connecting with people. I like music a lot, so I used music, my ukulele, my guitar, journaling, meditation, even taking walks outside just for like 20 minutes. It made a really big difference to just get my body moving as well, since I was sitting a lot all the time, and just being outside, because it's really hard to be outside right now. But even just taking a small walk makes a huge difference. And yeah, just connection was the most important thing for me though, because it was really hard not to be able to be with anyone or talk to anyone.
Yeah, and following along that, I would like to open this question for everybody now, whoever wants to answer. Why do you think it's so hard for human beings to be alone without social interaction?
We weren't wired to be alone. We're wired to be with each other. We're wired for connection. We need connection. It's almost as much as we need water and food and shelter and clothing. Connection really is everything. It drives everything. And, and purpose drives everything. And so both purpose and connection feed off of each other. And so in the midst of this pandemic, some people have lost that connection. And when you lose the connection, you could also lose some of that sense of purpose. And so it is really important to maintain that connection so you also maintain sense of purpose. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say about that.
Yeah, I was just going to add the same kind of thing. I mean, just an experiment was done with monkeys that, monkeys who were raised without touch, raised without connection, raised without mothers, for lack of a better, that was the experiment that was done, had a lot of social deficits and really turned away from the world. Which really speaks, obviously we're not monkeys, but it speaks to the importance of the just biological wiring to be together.
And I think to add to what Tracie and Cheryl has said already is that there's a developmental process that happens around the importance of social connection. So you can see at certain age groups where that sense of identity is connected to the social connections that are being made. And usually as you get older and more emotionally mature and actually age-wise, you're able to rely on yourself a little bit, not completely, but there's age groups, and I would say between, gosh, as early as 7 years old and then up until probably your mid 20s, if not a little bit more than that to 30s, that social connection is really important. The downside of that is that we're finding now that people are taking some risks, unnecessary risks that are endangering their health because of that demand for a social connection. And that's when it gets a little bit dangerous.
And to that point, I would say a lot of people make the assumption, parents can make assumptions that like if they see their child like on social media, there's connection there, and it's not. You can be on TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat. You're not connecting with the person, you're connecting with images, you're connecting with messaging, which is a very different issue. So you can have a lot of people that spend a lot of time on social media that feel very alone and isolated and lonely. And so there's a big assumption that just because you're on social media, you're connected to all these people. I know one of the big things is the numbers, right? Number of people following you, like that somehow implies that you're connected to all these people. And that's actually not what that means. And so I think it's really important for caretakers, for parents, for loved ones to understand, even with kids, to, that monitoring of that social media is a really big piece. To Angel's point, that there's good social media, and then there can be a very rabbit hole about social media.
What should someone do if they recognize that someone is in need of help?
And I can answer. I'm sure we all could, but I was just going to say, the importance. I think there's so much stigma, and we talked about men in particular, but just in general, mental health, or in general about struggling, and people want to be brave and put on, or I don't like the word brave, but put on a face that everything's okay. But the reality is, if you recognize someone in your life is struggling, to be able to ask about it, to be able to express concern. Hey, I've noticed that you seem really sad, or I've noticed you're not returning my calls in the same way. Is anything going on? And be able to be there with them and have a conversation, be able to verbalize things. I'm here for you, I'm worried about you, and definitely opening up to resources, that there is help and support out there. If the problem's more than just between you and me, there's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, there's Crisis Text Line, there's there's Teen Line. There's always someone out there. I know on CSUN campus, I believe your counseling center is still open as well. So there always are resources and help. And then staying with the friends and continuing to check in and, reminding them that you're here for them, finding ways to connect in a safe way. But not being afraid to ask is probably the biggest thing. Or if you notice something, trust your guts and, explore it with your friend.
Sorry, at CSUN, we do have our counseling services still open. So they are virtually, they do virtual meetings as well. We also have workshops that people can join, because it's a big thing with support. So if you do need support in any way, there are some workshops. I think it's on the CSUN website under counseling services that you can go to, and it's just another way to have that connection as well.
Dr. Stevens, do you have anything you would like to add?
In terms of the counseling services, I know that they have, when the office hours are closed, or the virtual office hours are closed, they do have a 24/7 hotline that anybody can call. But in terms of advice, I think what's really important is that, to listen, to not shame, to relate if you can. And then you're not expected to know all the different resources, but you can say, I know somebody in the counseling services, let me give a call to them, or let me find this out, and I'm going to send that to you. And I think, as others have said, is to kind of listen to your gut, because a lot of times people are afraid to say, how are you feeling, or you sound really depressed, or I'm concerned about you. that they're afraid that if they put that out there, that it's going to make the other person feel worse. And the person may say back to you, no, I think you're misreading me. I'm feeling pretty good. Or they might say, you know, thank you for asking, because I haven't talked a lot about this, and it's getting to me.
Can I just say one thing? The only other thing I would add is, if you see somebody really struggling, is not so much of trying to find the right words to say, but really actually listening, and just letting the person know. And sometimes listening is one of the best things to do. Not offering solutions, but listening.
Thank you all so much for joining us today to talk about such an important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for putting out this topic. It's really quite important. So I appreciate your dedication to this.
Did you make the transfer to Hong Kong for the Emerson project?
I was just about to, but did you see the boss's email? It doesn't look right.
It looked fine to me.
I don't remember him mentioning the Emerson project at our last meeting.
The bank in Hong Kong closes in 15 minutes. Make the transfer.
Yes, sir. It's on the way.
Mr. Jacobs, just transferred the money for the Emerson project.
What Emerson project?
Don't be that guy. Trust but verify.
Leah, did you put a new dent in that?
This one? No.
Were you texting and driving again?
Yes.
Hi, Leah.
Hi, Dad.
Sorry about your bumper.
Can't let him make a...
Dude, you better not be illegally downloading movies again. I don't want a virus on my computer. Seriously.
Yes!
Got it.
They got it. What an idiot.
When you rip off copyrighted material, someone could be ripping you off.
What the... Where's my money?
If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to one of these resources. On your screen, we posted contact information for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and a crisis text line. And we have more resources on our website, csuntvnews.com. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on Santa Clarita Valley Television and on LA 36. For producers, Jessica Vaughn, Brenda Saldana, and Sam Novicki, and moderator Sammy Fernandes, I'm Sarah Mia.